Today we're going to look at the front video on Terror Behind the Japanese Lines, Australia's Z Special Unit Explained. It's basically Australia's Special Forces commandos, the origin of the commandos, and what they did in World War II. It's pretty crazy stuff. As always, I'll put the original link to the video down below, as well as my Twitch, Discord, and Facebook. Please subscribe to my channel if you like the stuff and hit the like button. Cheers guys, let's get into it.
The point of covert operations is that, well, they're covert. Unfortunately, this means that covert special forces operatives tend to miss out on the gratitude they might deserve.
Yeah.
While the Second World War may have come to an end in 1945, the veterans of one particular Allied Special Forces unit swore never to speak of their heroic yet horrible exploits, bottling up their suffering till the waning years of their lives. These men were the bane of the Japanese in the Southwest Pacific Theatre, and they weren't opposed.
So I'll just say quickly, from World War II sort of stemmed both the SAS units and our Z Force Special units, now known as commandos. It's basically just guerrilla warfare tactics on a really well-trained force against another conventional force. Worked quite well for us. It still works quite well today. Yeah, I suppose in wars like Afghanistan, it's like fighting, using their tactics against them with a higher trained force.
To working with literal headhunters to see their common enemy dead on the jungle floor. In this video, we shine some much needed light in the Australian-led special force known as Z Special Unit. It's no secret that many of the world's special operations organisations have modelled themselves after British Spec Ops, as was the case with the Australian Inter-Allied Services Department, or ISD, which, in typical Spec Ops fashion...
See there, that looks like a Royal Marine Commando knife. Probably Royal Marines there, the Enfield 303s.
Underwent a series of administrative and acronymic changes to become the Services Reconnaissance Department, or SRD, in 1943. Yeah. While it was still the ISD, a field unit was formed under its command, designed to carry out intelligence, special reconnaissance and sabotage operations, as well as guerrilla warfare against Imperial Japan in the Southwest Pacific. This was Z.
See there, that's the classic Australian slouch hat, Owen submachine gun, which would have been perfect for what these guys were using. And it looks like the original green beret that the commandos wear today. Pretty cool.
Special Unit. While primarily a Vegemite-fueled Australian force, Z Special Unit featured volunteers from New Zealand, Britain, the Netherlands, and, while abroad, Indonesia too. Most of their pre-deployment training, however, took place in Australia, most notably in Refuge Bay, Sydney, Z Experimental Station, Queensland, and Fraser Island, Queensland, yet also in Western Australia and the Northern Territory.
They also did a lot of work in Canungra. I was in Canungra doing some pre-deployment training. It's predominantly a jungle warfighting place, and they've got a lot of commando and Z Force memorabilia there, sort of where they taught after the war.
And one of their trademark tools wasn't a gun, but a folding kayak, inside which many Z operatives would come to break their backs. While Z Special Unit took on 264 missions in 81 covert operations between June 1942 and the end of the war, its operations in Queensland, Singapore, New Guinea, and Borneo are among its most famous, or more appropriately, infamous. Yes.
I don't know what they would have been doing in Queensland, and I think I just stopped it at the right time because they're going to explain it. So let's have a look.
You heard that right. Z Special Unit did indeed operate in Queensland, Australia, but they obviously didn't go around blowing up bridges or anything like that. In reality, in preparation for a raid on a Japanese-occupied port in New Guinea, Z Special Unit decided it would be a good idea to practice on Australian naval vessels in Townsville Harbour. In the dead of night on the 22nd of June 1943, they paddled into the harbour on folding kayaks and stuck magnetic limpet mines to the hulls of 10 ships before fleeing.
trophies.
Some hours after the rooster crowed the following morning, the sailors in the harbour freaked out over the, unbeknownst to them, dummy mines. The mock operation was a success, but it led to the arrest and subsequent discharge of Lieutenant Samuel Warren Carey from Z Special Unit. The operation into New Guinea was also
I mean, we used to do random, crazy mission profiles. Like, we'd get told, here's a bank, you need to rob it. Figure out a plan how to rob it. Sounds really dumb, but it's just get you that critical thinking, how to work under difficult situations, gets you thinking.
But for unrelated reasons. What the Z operations learned in Townsville, they put to good use in Singapore later that year. By 1943, the Japanese had a firm grip on Singapore, an island stronghold vital to Allied operations in the Pacific. While they held onto the island until the end of the war, the Allies didn't make it easy for them. On the 2nd of September, 15 Australian and British Z operatives left Western Australia in the MV Crate, a Japanese fishing boat renamed after a small but highly venomous snake. They dyed their hair and skin dark and dressed themselves in sarongs, meaning to pass as Indonesian fishermen, and arrived off Singapore just over 3 weeks later. Unfolding their kayaks, they paddled to a nearby island from which they set Singapore harbour in their sights. On the night of the 26th, they pulled another Townsville, yet this time with very real limpet mines. The resulting blasts damaged or sunk 4 Japanese ships.
I mean, that's got to be the ultimate special force to be able to do that. Absolute badasses. What a force to have to be able to, be put through those conditions on that boat, and then to kayak in and put limpet mines on active warships. Crazy.
Z veteran Douglas Herbst put it, they travelled thousands of miles in enemy-occupied territory, then got out of the boat and paddled canoes for 100 miles into Singapore. The Crate was a little 70-foot boat, and it sank more shipping than cruisers with 800 men on board. But the success of the Crate and her sneaky crew was not an indication of successes to come. A year later, Z operatives tried a similar stunt, this time using a Malayan sailing ship to get them closer and motorized submersible canoes nicknamed Sleeping Beauties to deliver their payloads. Nearing Singapore harbour, a Japanese patrol boat stopped them, detecting their ploy and opening fire. The operatives scuttled their ship and escaped on kayaks. While some were able to put some distance between them and their attackers and ultimately resume their mission, potentially sinking 3...
Have a look. Looks like we have obviously 2 people. Looks like we have Sten guns or Owen guns. Some silenced railrod pistols. Water. Fuel explosives. That's crazy. Number of Mills bombs or grenades. That's a lot of gear to have in your kayak.
3 Japanese ships in Singapore harbour, 13 Z Special Unit operatives were killed immediately or lost their lives soon after. A further 10 were captured and beheaded. And this wasn't like in Skyrim or whatever. Some of these beheadings took 2 or 3 blows to complete.
There is a very famous Australian photo in the War Memorial. I think it was used as evidence for war crimes against Japan. But yeah.
Disaster struck in New Guinea in 1945 as well, yet the Z operatives assigned to this mission showed their mettle no less. Under the veil of night on the 11th of April, 8 Z operatives disembarked the patrol boat and started the long paddle to the shore of Japanese-occupied Muschu Island. The currents were strong that night, however, and the operatives ran into a reef, losing some of their equipment to the waves. While they were unable to get their feet on solid ground, their gear had washed up on the shore, signaling their presence to the Japanese, who sent out 1,000 troops to hunt them down. Despite their training, there was little the Z operatives could do. All but one of them were slain, but one man...
Although they did manage to dismantle 6 Japanese machine gun posts through them. That's still a pretty decent effort. I mean, what are they going to do when there's 1,000 enemy coming at you? And they know where you are.
Did survive. Fighting off the Japanese all by himself, one sapper, Edgar Mick Dennis, a hardened Australian commando, managed to escape and get vital intel into Allied hands, contributing in no small part to the Allies' success in the Aitape-Wewak campaign. Dennis survived the war as well, going on to say, "They were hunting me, and every time they got close, I would knock the first few over and then go bush." And on his bravery, he said, "I don't think it's born in you. It's not drilled into you. It's just something that happens in the spur of the moment. You know what you're going to do, and you do it." While singing,
I agree with that. I mean, I'm not saying I'm super brave or nothing, but I think sometimes bravery comes out of necessity. I've heard with Cameron Bird, with all these Victoria Cross winners, Daniel Kieran, Mark Donaldson, Keith Payne. The reason they did what they did was because they needed to get their mates to safety, or to help their mates get to safety.
Singapore and New Guinea were terrible. Zed's special unit operations in Borneo were a complete nightmare, even the successful ones. Between 1943 and 1945, Z operatives harried the Japanese troops who were occupying Borneo and inflicting unspeakable suffering on the island's people. As all good special forces should do, Zed's special unit made effective use of their environment, going as far to train and organize the indigenous natives to help them defeat their common enemy. One of such operations was Operation Argas, in which 44 Z Special Unit operatives gathered vital intel and trained indigenous natives.
Quickly pause it there. I guess that's probably where the Australian Army training team in Vietnam got some of their SOPs from, the way of doing things, probably from Z Force. The AATV did similar things, embedded into the locals in Vietnam, taught them how to fight, got them on their side and used them as an asset.
For a guerrilla campaign against their Japanese occupiers between March and October 1945. The intel they obtained clued the Australian 9th Division into Japanese numbers and movements in North Borneo, ultimately allowing them to take and secure it. The local guerrillas also managed to slay around 100 Japanese troops. Among the Z operatives in Borneo was Aussie Jack Tredrea, known by his fellow operatives as Commando Jack.
Medic, is he?
On his time in Borneo, where he was assigned to Operation Samut, Jack said, "We did our jump into Borneo 4 months before the invasion to organize the native population. We trained 2,000 of them, and when the invasion came, we had 32 operatives, each with their own guerrilla force."
Pretty impressive.
While Tredrea was quite active in the media in the waning years of his life, the story of Australian Sergeant Fred Sanderson isn't so widely known. After parachuting into Borneo in March 1945, he led some 500 headhunting natives against the Japanese, earning himself a Distinguished Conduct Medal and the headhunters under his charge more than 100 enemy heads. On his experience, Sanderson said, "I was always thinking what it was going to be like when I was hunted. I always thought the Japanese would get me one day." But all of these heroic exploits were swept under the rug, coming to light only decades after the end of the war. As Commando Jack put it, when we were
that thing. Hang on, I've got to go back a little bit there. Oh, it's a camera. I thought it was some kind of weapon that I hadn't seen before. He's just filming the amphibious.
As Commando Jack put it, when we were discharged out of Zed's special unit, the operatives had to sign a Secrets Act. It wasn't until 1980, at a national reunion in Melbourne, that we knew what the next guy did. So, what do you think? Had you heard of Zed's special unit before this video? How hard do you think it would have been to stay quiet about the war for more than 30 years? Lastly, can you think of any other operations in which Z operatives participated in? Let us know in the comment section below.
Alright guys, so that was a sort of a pretty good brief overview of Z Special Unit, or Z Force. I know there was also the M Special Unit, which were coastal watchers. They would embed into local populations and watch the coast for Japanese ships. So yeah, they were sort of using a lot of guerrilla tactics against the Japanese, which is strange to think. We sort of still use those tactics with special forces today, only to a higher level of training. Yeah, what do you guys think? We should do some more videos on this subject, I think. As always, if you like the video, hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, hit subscribe. And if you'd like to join the discussion, hit the Discord button. Come join it, come chat and say hello. Alright guys, till next time, catch you later.